In the first week of July, the Allied invasion convoys began assembling in the ports and harbours along the North African coast. In addition to more than 250 warships, the invasion fleet would consist of a further 2,000 vessels. Mainly these were merchant ships carrying supplies and equipment, landing ships carrying troops, tanks and vehicles, or assault craft of a variety of types. When the embarkation of men and equipment was complete, the convoys set sail for their final rendezvous areas north of Malta. In the assault wave were 8 divisions, nearly 200,000 men. Most of them were expected to be ashore by the 3rd day, along with more than 2,000 tanks and guns, 14,000 vehicles, and supplies of food, fuel and ammunition, sufficient for several days' fighting. The invasion and conquest of Sicily was to be carried out by 2 Allied armies, both part of General Alexander's 15th Army Group. The American 7th Army was commanded by General George Patton, who had previously commanded the American 2nd Corps in Tunisia. For the assault landings on the south coast, 7th Army had 3 infantry divisions, with a further armoured division in reserve. The British 8th Army was commanded by General Bernard Montgomery, who had proved himself in North Africa one of the most able field commanders of the war. Landing in the southeast corner of Sicily, Montgomery had 4 divisions, 2 of which, the 50th and the 51st, were veterans of the North African campaign. The invasion fleet was deployed in 2 task forces. The Western Task Force was commanded by Vice Admiral Kent Hewitt of the United States Navy and would be responsible for landing and supporting 7th Army's troops. The Eastern Task Force, assigned to the British landings, was commanded by Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay, mastermind of the Dunkirk evacuation and the Royal Navy's foremost expert on amphibious operations. Air support would be coordinated by Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Tedder as Commander-in-Chief of the combined Mediterranean Allied Air Forces. The principal Axis formation in Sicily was the Italian 6th Army, commanded by General Alfredo Guzzoni. 6th Army had a field strength of more than 300,000 men, deployed in 9 divisions. Most of these, however, were garrison commands, poorly equipped, ill-trained, and of low fighting value. The main striking force on the island was the 14th Panzer Corps, consisting of the 15th Panzer Grenadiers and the Hermann Göring Panzer Division. The 14th Panzer Corps was under the administrative command of Lieutenant General Fridolin von Senger, who was also the German liaison officer with General Guzzoni's 6th Army. During the battle for Sicily, the 14th Panzer Corps would be reinforced by elements of a further 2 German divisions and placed under the temporary command of General Hans Huber, a veteran of the Eastern Front. Air support for the Axis forces in Sicily would be provided mainly by the German 2nd Air Fleet, which was now under the command of Field Marshal von Richthofen. Second Air Fleet had extensive bases in Sicily and southern Italy, and still possessed several hundred serviceable aircraft. On July the 9th, the wind rose unexpectedly, and the normally placid waters of the central Mediterranean grew high and rough. Within a few hours, winds of 40 miles an hour were sweeping in from the west, and the invasion armada was pitching and tossing in a growing swell. Although the British landings on the east coast would be sheltered from the worst effects of the weather, the American landings, if conditions persisted, would have a dangerous combination of crosswinds and high waves. Allied leaders considered the option of postponement, but the huge operation was already too far advanced, and the element of surprise would almost certainly be lost. Fortunately, there were indications that the wind might ease off during the night, and the decision was taken to proceed according to schedule. When the Allied invasion fleet approached the Sicilian coast in the early hours of July the 10th, the high winds which had bedeviled its passage from Malta had diminished to no more than a strong breeze. Hoping for surprise, the naval guns remained silent as the assault boats crept shoreward. Then, while still dark, they erupted in fury, pulverizing the coast in response to distant enemy artillery and machine gun fire. Over the next few hours, while the warships trained their guns on targets inland, the invaders swarmed ashore in ever-increasing numbers. The enemy coastal defenses proved completely inadequate and were easily overwhelmed. Their Italian garrisons were either routed or surrounded and forced to surrender. On the first day, the most determined resistance came from the Luftwaffe, flying mainly from bases in southern Italy. In the British sector, the landing areas came under intermittent attack, and a hospital ship was sunk. In the American sector, several vessels were hit, including the destroyer Maddox, which went down with heavy loss of life. These attacks persisted throughout the first 2 days of the landings, before Allied air superiority over the beaches could be properly established. The warships were also active during this period, in counter-battery fire and in breaking up enemy concentrations. 2 attempts by the Hermann Göring Division to drive wedges through to the coast were successfully defeated by accurate naval gunfire, and by the 13th, the division had gone over to the defensive. For the Allies, the initial stages of the campaign were marked everywhere by astonishing successes. All the landing beaches had been quickly secured at the cost of only a few hundred casualties, and during the first 2 days, they had put ashore 80,000 men, 10,000 vehicles, and 1,000 guns. By the 15th, the Allies had secured a firm lodgment in southern Sicily. In the British sector, Siracusa had been captured with its port facilities intact on the first day, and Augusta had been taken on the 13th. From Licata, Gela, and Scoglitti, the Americans had advanced between 15 and 50 miles inland.